Good afternoon. I apologize, I'm going to be drinking a little bit more water than usual. I had a little bit of a nasty sickness last week, so this is the first time I've talked in a long time. So I'm going to try and keep the voice fresh today. But thank you for having me. I truly appreciate coming to this. I got really excited when I got invited here because I have a lot of love for higher ed, not just because of what you all do, but specifically for people who work in higher ed, staff, faculty across the campus, because I myself, when I was working, or when I attended the University of Northern Colorado, I worked a lot of on-campus jobs. I did front desk at the dorms. I also worked at the rec center. Yeah. See some student or employees in here. Worked at the rec center. I was in student senate, and then I ended there actually working in student housing. So I ran the whole gamut, loved working with student activities, and people who worked on campus were some of my favorite people, because y'all are just some weirdos, and I love it. And you're weird in such a good way. You're probably weird in just weird ways, but you're also weird in really good ways in the fact that if you think about it, many of us sitting in this room, if you just decided to take your title or something similar to it and do it elsewhere in a private business or something like that, you could probably make more money right now. So what kind of crazy people decide, yeah, I know, and don't do that anyway, right? You can totally do it, but you don't. So what is it about this that makes you stay? You have people that have worked here for decades, literal decades, and have stuck with it. And I've been sitting with some of them today, and I've asked each person, what is it about this place that keeps you here, that makes you hungry? And they've talked about a lot of the things that we've heard about today that have gotten you this award, but it also always came back down to the people that they work with. The students, yes, but also just the people that show up to them, to the left of them, the right of them. And so thank you for being those people. Today we're going to talk a little bit about purpose. That's one of my passions. And obviously this is the kind of industry where purpose goes a long way, right? When I asked that question earlier, why do you stick around, you weirdos? Probably part of that is because there's something about what you do here that resonates with you. It gives you fulfillment beyond just the act itself, right? On a daily basis, it's not just the typical tasks that we go through that make us feel super fulfilled, but usually it's the sense of accomplishment of what comes after that, or what we provided for people. And so today, I want to helpfully take that and reconnect you with that, because you guys have done amazing things over these past year and years, but sometimes we get to that level, we've done it a lot, and then we go, cool, what's next? And deciding what's next and getting excited for that, one of the best things we can do is revisit why we came here in the first place. I want to start off that conversation with a story about another guy who's kind of a weirdo and thinks differently. It's this guy. Anyone know who this might be? And the camera is kind of a giveaway. I heard the company name. The guy is George Eastman. He is the founder of Eastman Kodak. So any of you who said Kodak, you were in the right ballpark. So George Eastman left his job as a bank teller in 1880 to start working on cameras. Now, at that time, in the late 1800s, the camera business was completely, all photography was only professionals. So you didn't have individuals having access to pictures like we do now. Because, well, there was many reasons, but mainly because of how cameras were constructed, right? They were big, the parts were heavy, you had to be able to correctly assemble them, and then once you took the pictures, if you had the expertise to assemble this contraption and lift it and lug it around with you, then you had to actually put the work in to develop the pictures. The chemicals that you used to develop them were very toxic as well as expensive, so this was something that just wasn't accessible to most people. And so Eastman said, knowing the power of memories and knowing the power of moments, he had a vision of a world where photography was accessible to everybody. It was democratized and simple, easy to understand so that anybody could do it. Because we all deserve to have access to the memories and the moments in our life. And so that's why he left his job in 1880. And over the next 8 years before he created this camera, which would be the original Kodak camera, which is, as you can see, a very tiny handheld device, he would go into invent one of the big breakthroughs in all of camera history. And he did that by taking plastic called celluloid, which was originally created for dentures, and repurposing it into what we now know as film. So he's the father of modern film. Now, after he was able to do this, he was able to create the camera that you see in front of you, which was much more light, portable, easy, and the company became a success almost immediately because now everyone had access to something they never had access to before. Over the coming years, Kodak would go on to become one of the biggest companies in the world, at its peak employing over 120,000 people. Eastman would become one of the richest men in the world before he died in 1932. And they would continue to innovate even beyond his death as Kodak. In the years following, in 1935, they came out with the world's first color film, which would lay the foundation for motion pictures. They invented, if you remember, the drop-in tray for sharing any of your old photos on vacations. The original slideshow, that was them. And then in 1975, they had another innovation that really was world-changing. Anybody have any idea what that might be? No, that's Polaroid. Digital. Which is weird, right? When I say digital photographs and digital photography, Kodak is not typically the first thing that pops into anyone's mind, right? And especially if you think about in 1975, if they were the people who invented digital photography, think about the amount of time that it took for that to become kind of commonplace, right? For those who remember it, like I do, when was it that first digital cameras started popping up in our own living rooms, right? By the norm, it was probably late 90s, early thousands, right? It was when those started to become more commonplace, even before they got part of your cell phones. So how is it that the world's largest photography company, with the biggest reach, the biggest resources, and the biggest influence, if they made this discovery in 1975, why did it take such a long time for the world to pick up on digital photography? Well, the reason is, in 1975, a man by the name of Stephen Sasson, the man from the R&D department who's credited with that invention, came into Kodak leadership and said, hey, look, we've got this invention. It's called digital photography. What you can do is we don't need film. We don't need to develop these pictures. You take the picture. It's stored electronically. We don't have to worry about printing them out. They can print them out however they want. This is going to be life-changing. This is going to change the world and the entire landscape of photography. And Kodak's leadership said, yes, yes it will. Unfortunately, we also are primarily, currently, all of that landscape that would be changed. Because at that time, Kodak they sold you not only the box mounts for the camera itself, the film that you would take and drop into the camera, they would also sell the liquid to produce the film to the people who would produce it, and then they would sell you the paper that you would print the photographs on. End to end, they owned your memories at that time. And so they looked at this and they said, cool, let's keep working on this in the background, file some patents. How long do you think it'll take for the rest of the world to catch up? And Sasson guessed around 10 years. And he was a little generous because 13 years later, in 1988, a small Japanese company called Fuji developed the world's first to-market digital camera. And they would soon partner with another small Japanese company called Nikon to develop more and more of these technologies and basically trailblaze what is today now known as the digital camera landscape. But during that time, Kodak didn't lose out entirely. They realized what was going on, and they made billions of dollars over the next decade selling access to their patents. Right? They developed the technology, so they would license out some of that technology for some people to use and develop their own digital cameras and things like that. So Kodak was now still doing really well financially, and now everyone was kind of leaving their current industry of film so they could go pursue this digital thing. And all of a sudden, they now were king again with no competitors in film, and they also were making money from digital. Until the patents ran out, which tends to happen with patents. And when that happened, within 5 years, This was the front page of the New York Times website, and it read, Eastman Kodak files for bankruptcy. This first sentence I wanted to make sure I got in the screenshot because it says, Eastman Kodak, the 131-year-old film pioneer, has been struggling for years to adapt in an increasingly digital world. Interesting that the people who discovered digital photography in the first place struggled to adapt in an increasingly digital world. The reason I bring this up is that when we are clear about why we do what we do, we make ungodly advances in science, technology, socially. We come together like never before, and we do amazing things. But when we confuse why we do what we do for what we do, when we don't see ourselves as world changers, but we see ourselves instead as camera salespeople, or a film company, or just a university, sometimes we go the opposite direction. I mentioned earlier that at its peak, 120,000 people worked at Kodak. As of January of this year, 6,000 globally work for Kodak. And if that didn't make things bad enough, do you know who their primary remaining customer group is? Professional photographers. The exact people that Eastman founded the company to try and get away from. I don't say this to scare you. I say this to inspire you. Because we can absolutely reconnect and re-identify with why we're here. Sometimes we have that temptation to stop, to focus on the metrics, to focus on the win, and absolutely we need those to measure our progress and how we're doing. But at the same time, if that's all we keep score by, eventually we get ourselves in trouble. And so I want us to have a conversation, or at least start the conversation today about why we do what we do. Why do we do the things that put us on this list? Why does it matter that we're a great place to work for? And where are we going next? How do we get into that top 50? How do we move there as a unit, and what does that unit say?